So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about how to be completely free of the opinions of other people. And if you look at your life, your whole life, and the types of behaviors that you might have or have adopted, a lot has been driven by what other people think of us as human beings. We are wired to constantly consider other people's opinions of us, how we come across, how we speak, how we communicate, how much money we make, and basically the approval of others. And this thing really controls a lot of the people's life. And I know that even though I tried to rebel against other people's opinions, it did control in certain situations my behavior a lot, and in certain other situations I found myself to not care what the person in front of me thinks about. And this is something quoting directly from Dan Pena. He said, "You don't know how limitless your life can be when you don't care what other people think about you." So in the interest of accomplishing that limitlessness, I'm creating this video for you to really have that freedom from approval, complete limitlessness, complete expression of how you want to express yourself, how you want to come across, and not caring what the person in front of you thinks about. And this is something that I have been researching for the last few years, because I found myself tiptoeing around certain individuals in my life, and I started to see a pattern that every time I'm tiptoeing around someone, or watching my words, or watching my behavior, or sort of in reaction to the person in front of me subconsciously, and finding myself getting uncomfortable in the presence of a certain person that I want to please, I have discovered that in those situations, unconsciously and subconsciously, I have given them power or authority over me. And anytime you feel lack of confidence, lack of power, a sense of reactions, this reactionary sort of behavior and thought, that constant obsession to please the person in front of you. It could be a hot girl, it could be your boss, it could be a certain friend that you are in reaction to, or a certain person in your environment, certain person in your family, maybe the father figure, or even the mother, elder sister, elder brother, those kind of figures that tend to have authority in your life at various levels in the family, company, business, maybe a business partner that you have that owns majority in the company. You will see a pattern where in each of these environments, the level of the power and groundedness that you have in each situation changes, and your sense of what those people think about you will tend to change. The degree of importance you put on someone else's opinion is directly linked with the degree of power they have over you. So when we talk about being free from approval, it's not going to happen in every single situation right away. So even you can do the mindset shift as much as possible. You can convince yourself, oh, I don't care what the person thinks about me. But when the person walks into the door, you suddenly have a filter on, you have a front, you have a little show that you put on. And I know this used to happen with me. So I started to see a pattern. I'm going to be talking about how to disrupt this power, get your power back, and actually be approval free, so that you can operate more effectively and you can accomplish things much faster, because you don't care about what the person in front of you thinks about. And there are hidden and deeper mechanisms that make this happen. And I'm going to break it down, each and every one of them. Okay. So I started to notice this pattern when I was dating a Serbian photographer, a Serbian model photographer, a couple of years ago. And at that time, I didn't have any money. I didn't have the kind of status that I have right now, the position that I have right now. And she was completely out of my league. And I had moved to Dubai. I wasn't living in Dubai for a few years, and this girl was completely out of my league. And at that point, I found myself that I'm watching my speech, how I come across to her. I'm watching, I'm completely in my head. I'm watching my behavior, and everything that I'm doing is to please her. And I've given all the power to her. Even when we would have, sleep with each other, it would be her decision, not mine. So she had complete control over the situation. But I had power, for example, at the family level with my brother. I was able to speak my mind to him directly without tiptoeing around. But when I went to Dubai and I started living with him and I was working with him for a brief period of time, when he was kind of my boss, I didn't consider it, he considered it. At that time, I started to feel more reaction towards him, but this girl was not in my life and I felt power even if I speak to her. So what happened? What changed? What shifted that power dynamic? And when I was much younger, I did care a lot about what my mother thought. But as I started to become more and more financially independent, I stopped the effect that my mother had to influence me, or the importance that I gave to her opinions became, reduced dramatically. And similarly, certain individuals in my friend circle a couple of years back, I cared about what they thought of me. And if I look at it, in all of the situations where I did not have the power, I was essentially the puppet of the person in front of me. And I was a little puppet that was being controlled without knowing or without even considering that I'm being controlled. But somebody has gotten complete control over my mind. It's kind of like when you have a dog or you see a dog and you show him the biscuit and you have almost a complete control over him in that situation. And a lot of the people derive pleasure out of that, and this could be happening to you in various environments, this sort of a sense of control that other people have, and you have to care about what they think. Even if you tell yourself, I'm not going to care about what this person thinks, you still find yourself in this loop of obsessing about pleasing this person, and this person has got complete control over you. So what makes this happen? It's your position in relation to them that makes this happen. You cannot get completely approval free or free from worrying about the approval of others as long as they have power over you. You cannot simply, if you work in a company, one day wake up and say, I don't give a shit about what my boss thinks, and I'm going to speak my mind to him. If you speak your mind, you may lose your job. So you have your speech, which is controlled at the level of office when your boss is around. Or if you speak your mind to your wife or your girlfriend, you may discover that if you even, speak your mind, you can lose the relationship, and you could lose a lot of things in your life that are dependent on that person. Similarly, if you have a friend circle, the leader in that group or the most powerful individual in that group, maybe who gives out his house for you to party in, or whatever the reason is for that person's power, if you piss that person off, you may lose certain resources. So it's not just about worrying about what other people think. It's why do you worry about them, what they think? It's typically some resource or something you're getting from that person can be taken away. And that thing that you're getting from that person is the leverage that they have. Whether in a romantic relationship, it could be sex, which is a lot of the women use it to control men. Some of the men also use it, who are the ones who are good in bed and they're dating someone a little bit less attractive than them. They can use sex as a tool to control. Men typically use finance in this area of relationship. Women use sex and they exercise control through that. Women also know how to cook. So she can start to cook very good dishes, your favorite dishes, and she can please you like that, but also gain leverage at the same time. And she may withdraw that thing that she's doing if you don't behave according to her. So it could be a control mechanism. Not all women use this. Not all women use sex and food, but that these are things that a woman can use. Eventually, this power evolves into controlling children and the mind of your child. You know, what opinion the child has about the father is typically dependent on the woman. So she has that power, and that's my theory, that a lot of the women want to have children. Not all, but some of the women want to have children to have control and power over the man. So these hidden power dynamics are there in every single relationship. And your boss has financial control over your life, especially if you have a salary that's high and you can't get that salary, or you think you can't get that salary outside somewhere. He may have authority over you and power, and they may exercise. And this may happen this could happen with a banker who's offering you a favorable deal that you haven't managed to find elsewhere. Or you could be dating a girl that's a little bit way out of your league. And in that sense, that girl would have power over you. And you will see that in those areas where the other person have that kind of leverage on you, you will tend to care a lot about what they think of you. And essentially, you would not have the freedom. You would not feel that you have freedom of behavior, freedom of speech to be able to act what your true intentions are. You know, you can't sort of let yourself and unleash yourself of who you are if you have these individuals controlling you. And if you're controlled in one area, it's, it typically is happening in various areas, and your thought process is controlled, your speech is controlled, your behavior is controlled. So I started to see this pattern where in the childhood, I was dependent on my parents, so they had the authority. Then the authority was shared in the school with teachers and the principal. So their opinion mattered a lot to me when I was in school. After school, again, my mother, eventually that shifted to my brother when he was a partial quasi-investor. So even though I tell myself I'm not going to care about what I think, I'm going to speak my mind, well, he would just withdraw the support and he would take away the resources. So I started to see the power move there. And then briefly, the women, the beautiful women that I did not before have access to, they would have a lot of power. And I would get frustrated that why this person is mistreating me, speaking to me in an exploitative manner, oppressive manner. And I know that, and I'm listening to this, and I'm not able to respond. And there is a scene in the movie Matrix, #1, the first part, where Agent Smith is looking at Neo and his mouth becomes frozen and he's not able to speak. And I think that's the experience a lot of the people can have when they're under this power structure. This person has leverage over them and they want to say something. They have this anger, but they're not able to express this anger. And that's how that happens when somebody has power over you. So watch that pattern in your environment, home, family, and typically these types of relationships can get very abusive, oppressive, exploitative. You look at Hollywood, certain producers, certain directors who had a tremendous amount of power to make somebody famous or non-famous. These individuals tend to become exploitative. Not always, but some of the people did become exploitative because of the position they had. And what happened when the social media space came and the monopoly of fame was broken? It's not a coincidence that just when YouTube came and social media came and the monopoly of fame was broken, the Me Too movement came about. Because people suddenly had voice, and that leverage of fame and power was shifted to individuals instead of these monopolistic machines, right? And these individuals who had positions of power within that industry. All of that got dislocated to social media, and that's when people started to express what actually went on. Same thing happens in life where we are being exploited, not paid enough, or our behavior is controlled in many ways. And we don't know why that's happening, is because we have allowed other people to have power over us by doing us favors or offering things we think we can't get from somewhere else, and they exercise control. So how do you actually get free from these control mechanisms? Here is an analogy, and I'm going to use dating as an example. I happen to have some experience in that area, I love dating analogies. So I'm going to give you an analogy. If you think this is the hottest girl that you can get, and this is it, you can't go above this, well, then that's it. That person has complete control over you because it's the hottest person you could get, and you would be willing to surrender everything you have. And that's what a lot of the guys do. They surrender all the money that they have to this girl that they falsely believe, that the best option available. And they give all their time, all their money and everything. And what happens? This person has too much power and the relationship becomes abusive. So how does a person who is in this position break this cycle? Well, you have to create options for you, better, newer options for you. And I noticed that with the Serbian photographer, after that, I started to date this girl who was a TV presenter. She was a news anchor in one of the major news channels in Dubai. She has interviewed, some famous celebrities. And when I was dating her, I wasn't thinking about this girl. And then when I started to date better and better women, progressively, nobody had the power because all the power was with me and my skill of going out and meeting beautiful women. This is a couple of years back before I started to build my company. So I started to see this trend where if I have better options in that area, the person loses their power. And then I started to watch that person was in the position that I was in, where they are watching how they talk to me. And they are seeing that, authority has shifted. And then I remember with my brother, because I was financially dependent on him, he had all the control and power. And when I took that power back, he was not able to say anything to me. It was almost like he lost the power in his voice. What just happened? And I tend to be very comfortable in my skin. I was sitting down, I was relaxed when I met him, and he could not understand what's the shift of power that just happened. It's because I can speak my mind and he has no power to take anything away from me because I have given up what he was doing for me. I have said, I don't want anything. I don't need anything. Keep this thing that you're doing. And I will find a way to fulfill this need in some other structure, which is more based on abundance of options. So having an abundance of options is absolutely critical for people to not have this kind of power. And that's the solution, is the abundance of opportunities. If you have a job that you think you're being paid the highest, you should constantly be looking for better opportunities, either to make money online or better jobs, better environment, and you will see suddenly your behavior is going to change. Another thing that I have seen is that some employees, even though the boss and employee dynamic tends to be that of power and control, sometimes some employees make themselves irreplaceable to the company. And they are fulfilling a role or a duty where it's extremely important for the business owner, and they don't want to leave. They don't want to lose the person. A good example of this would be Steve Jobs. Even though he was not the major shareholder of Apple, he had a lot of power and influence because he had exposed himself in the media and the stock price was dependent on his involvement. And another thing, he was very innovative and he was a visionary. And he was an extraordinary leader. So his position or his role that he was fulfilling was so valuable to the company that he had a tremendous amount of power within Apple, even though he wasn't the major shareholder and he was a minority shareholder and he was an employee of the company. So how does an employee have so much power? Because it's Steve Jobs, right? He's a genius. That's the perception. And because of that, he had tremendous amount of power to control the company, which he did. So it's not just about if somebody is a boss, you can't have the power. You can have the power if you are fulfilling something unique and you have leverage over them. And on top of that, you have better options available. So it's always a question of what's the leverage. And I also started to see this pattern of seeking other people's approval. If I go into somebody else's house or in somebody else's office, the power dynamics would change. Outside of that office, I would have the power. It was a neutral area. Or if they're in my house, I would have the power. But if I go to their house, they have the power and control. But if there is a need that I'm fulfilling that's much bigger than what they're doing for me in the house, let's say serving food or whatever, if I have a role in their life that's much bigger than that, then even in their house, I will have the power. So, interesting dynamics. In each of the relationships, you will have power that would be shifting and contexts that would be shifting and situation would be shifting and evolving. And based on that, power keeps moving from one person to another in different situations based on how much leverage they have. And based on that, how much you care about other people's opinion is going to be dependent on. So, if you want to be truly free of other people's opinion, you will have to gain power in every single situation as much as possible. You have to have power in every single environment you go, and you cannot enter into an environment where you know you will not have the power, you will not have the authority, you will not have control. Before you enter the environment, you have to ask yourself this question: what is valuable in that environment, and how can I take control of that thing that people value? How can I have leverage in this situation? And do not enter into a situation where you don't have leverage in, because most likely you're going to be controlled, you're going to be exploited. Because resources, whether it's, physical resources or people, move towards structures of power. Everything moves towards structures of power. So you have to have that power, and you have to be also willing to lose the leverage that sometimes people do favors to us. You have to be willing to lose those favors. You have to be willing to survive without that person. You have to be able to survive without certain groups of people. So in certain communities, I've noticed this in Indian communities, which is where I was born in, things are very dependent on community, right? Relatives, families, everything is involved with each other, and they get into business with each other. So if this community of people abandon you, then your chances of survival becomes very low. And that's the way the community is structured. It's a very community-based nation. And once survival starts to depend on community, and that this is why you see that in Indian communities, because the family unit and the relatives and all of this extended family has so much power, to the point where they even decide who the guy is going to marry through arranged marriages. And they even get married amongst each other, and the guy doesn't have any control over the situation, or the girl doesn't have any control. It's because the entire survival, and it's structured like that from childhood, that they keep giving perks to the children, and they keep binding them with the whole structure. And eventually, the person born in the family doesn't have any control. Eventually, the family ends up controlling the person, and the person doesn't essentially have free will, and that person becomes a puppet of the family. I'm fortunate that I was able to deflect a lot of that. I was also subjected a little bit to that, not too much, but going to events, going to family. And this is the point that I'm making, is all of this is going to affect your work progress. This is the reason I'm talking about a personal life, is because all of this tends to affect your business life. Because if you want to work and you live in your family house and you're told, no, we need to go to this marriage, what are you going to do? Or if you live in the United States, you're not even subjected to this. Your girlfriend may say, no, we need to do this. And then if you don't do it, she will deny you sex. What are you going to do? You know what I mean? So you will find yourself doing things what other people want is because they are in control. And for you to be completely effective in your business life, you have to take care of these things. You cannot depend on one person for anything alone. You cannot have that single point of failure, it's called in some books that I've read, single point of failure, where, if that person doesn't fulfill that need, the whole thing is going to collapse. No. You need to start having replacements. Even your girlfriend, I'm sorry to say, or if you're a girl watching this, even the guy. You don't necessarily have to exercise that replacement, but it's good to have some option so that, you're not overly dependent on anything. So that's the video on how do you free yourself from other people's opinion, is by first freeing yourself from the power structures that have been imposed upon you that you may not be present to on a daily basis. And a lot of the insecurity comes from this. It's because you're in an insecure position and you find yourself in an insecure position in relation to that person. I felt very insecure with this Serbian photographer because if she leaves, I'll be alone. And my reality at that time was very miserable. So I was very afraid. So I was doing things just to please her that I didn't want to do. And I didn't have the confidence in my ability that I would be able to replace her. I will be able to actually create a much better life even if she leaves. You always have to have that confidence in yourself that you can always find something better. It doesn't matter how catastrophic the loss seems, you can always recover from it, unless it's a health issue. That's why I'd say take care of your health. But other than that, most situations you can come out of, you can find better options available. And that's the lesson on how not to care about what people think, is by being in positions of power. And if somebody has power over you in certain area, inquire why that is the case. There is always a reason. There is always a reason why they have a power, and can you replace what they are fulfilling through other sources? Through other sources. This world has an abundance of everything. So make sure you get access to some of that and free yourself of the power structure and, as a result, their opinions, so that who you are truly comes out and shines through. I will talk to you soon.